Oh, and just a quick heads up, I
Get
remember I
ready
mentioned.
for a great show.
Black space is a place for us.
Real people with real issues.
Discussing real topics.
Black space.
A safe space for our community.
Hello, I'm George Middleton, your host this evening on this podcast episode of Black Space Live. The topic of our discussion today, we're going to examine the question in part 2. How do we bridge the gap between the black man and the black woman? Before we get started, I would like to take this time briefly to encourage you to like, subscribe, and share this podcast. In other words, don't be selfish with this content. Share the love. You can catch us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and Spotify. And you can also catch us on Anchor FM, Podcast Addict, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, and iHeart Radio. Now, normally I would introduce our panelists for today, but you can't introduce that which is already known. We have a panel of superstars. So instead of introducing them, I'm just going to have them send out their greetings and whatever things they might have on their heart to say before we start the show. Let's start with Zuri.
Hey, Black Space. This is Zuri. It's been a long time. Looking forward to today's show. It's always exciting. Glad to be back.
Welcome, Zuri. Let's go to Laquita.
Hello, my people. My name is Lakita Beal, and I am a sacred woman. I'm also a life health, and annuities specialist. I've been licensed and doing that for about 15 years, and I also do marketing. You can follow me on TikTok. My TikTok is The Love Alchemist, and I'll be happy to follow you back.
Welcome, Lakita, and I stand corrected. I was, that probably happens to your name a lot, right?
It does.
Well, welcome, Lakita, and my apologies. And the big Bobby Drake.
Pleasantries, family. This is your boy Bobby Drake, reporting live from sunny or rainy South Florida. I am 1/3 of the Manifestations 2020 podcast. Feel free to touch bases with us on YouTube and Facebook at Manifestations 2020. And you can follow me on Twitter at the prestigious Bobby Drake. I'll be sure to follow you back and stay connected.
Welcome, Bobby. Now, I got to just take a quick minute to give man-on-man respect. I caught the Drake on a post where he I don't know, you had either you were acknowledged for place you had placed in a competition, and when I realized that Bobby was into this, I would already have huge respect for Bobby because his intellect is beyond compare. I mean, the brother, he's young, he's gifted, he's good looking, but he is an intellectual powerhouse. But then I get on this post and I see the boy can back it up with the physical game. And I'm like, wait a minute. Oh, this cat is not to be messed with. It was a thing of art. It was beautiful to watch. I was Bobby. I didn't think I could be any more impressed than I was with you. But when I saw that post and saw that you had placed and saw that you were in mixed martial arts, I believe it mixed martial arts or was it judo?
Jiu-jitsu.
Jiu-jitsu.
I'm a little too old to get the moneymaker banged up.
Yeah. Well, jiu-jitsu, that's the killer right there. I mean, you can end the game on a regular with just that, because the average person doesn't know that technique, man. I mean, it'll just, you just press the button, it's over. And so yeah, Bobby, much respect to you, brother.
Appreciation. Just want to let the folks know it's amazing what a nice little side salary can do for your name in the streets. Appreciate you, George. Glad my money's not going to waste up.
All right. So anyway, I want to open up with just a little monologue for this. I think this is a really valuable topic that we're going to discuss. It's crucial. It's 2023, and all of us know that there is a shift going on in the consciousness of our country, if not the world. So for us, as it pertains to our community in particular, all the chips are on the table. I mean, if we're not part of the solution for us, then we are part of the problem. So, and part of that being the relationship between the male and female in our community. So here goes. Since part one of this series, my eyes have been opened even more to the gap between the male and female in our community. After our first episode, I would find myself in various social circles, and this topic would just organically come up in conversation. As I questioned the women in these circles, it became ever more apparent just how wide a crevasse that this gap is between us. Now, in general, there is just an automatic gap to our difference in gender. However, when you add in the unique experience of no other group but the African in America, the generational historic systemic abuse, the gap at this point appears impenetrable to any attempts at closure. It is as if the male and female African born in America did not and does not have the same Black experience. Here's where I find it most evident. In the population of the six-figure successful African female, they in general appear to be the least aware, knowledgeable, or concerned about the plight of their male counterpart. They are quicker to blame and criticize him for his current condition than to understand the why behind it. Now, I can understand this more easily in the struggling single mother with 3 or 4 children and just trying to make ends meet, getting day to day. She doesn't have the time nor the energy to understand what men are going through, as she is in constant survival mode. But the six-figure African female, logically, she should be in more of a position to educate herself on these historical and contemporary issues. She is in a more effective position to advocate, influence, and take strategic action in support of her male counterpart. But how can she if she's not willing to fully acknowledge the fact of the systemic attack on her community through her male counterpart, especially if she herself has a son, soon to be a man? So the discussion today is going to be a challenge of focus on the African female. We're going to address the following points from the average man's perspective. Point number 1, Most women do not understand men. They do not understand what we truly want and how we think and our biological urges and design. Point number 2. Most women do not understand the male experience. The fact that 1 out of 3 men between the ages of 18 to 13 are virgins or have not had sex in over a year. They don't understand that men within that age group are involuntarily celibate. And in doing this research, I learned a new word, incel. I'd never heard of this word until I started doing this series. Point number 3. Most men, now these points are just the average man's perspectives, okay? Most men are invisible to most women. Women only see the top 10 to 20% of men and completely ignore or don't see the other 80%. Most women are after or are only interested in that top 10 to 20% of men. Point number 4. Most women look for reasons to disqualify men, while most men look for reasons to qualify women. And last point, there are no shortage of men. There are a shortage of women who do not want to date the men who they actually qualify for socially and economically. So that's to set the context of this discussion. And what I want to do is first just do a roundtable on what you thought of this impromptu monologue I put together. And look, I have thick skin, so, don't hold back. Let's start with Lakita.
Okay, you listed out some great points there, and I was only able to take down a few as you listed them out. But I want to say that as a woman who out earns her husband, and I am socially aware of the issues that our men face, I could see how a woman who earns 6 figures could, I want to ask you some questions before I answer this. So you're saying the women who earn higher are just not educated as into what Black men experience in America? Or do they acknowledge it but don't really identify with it or won't give like reason to it as into why they're not excelling, their plight, or as in white supremacy against Black men?
Yeah, they're not really educated on the circumstances of the African male's current condition, but neither is the whole of America.
Right.
And in many ways, neither is the man actually going through the situation. But as it pertains to the African woman for this conversation, I believe that is a relevant piece.
Okay, so I want to say I'm just a rare person because I read a lot of books. I've educated myself heavily on white supremacy when I turned 12 because I noticed some things were changing socially for me and I needed to understand why they were happening. So I started delving into like all the books from all different types of people. So from Benjamin Franklin all the way to Dr. Frances Cress Wells, and I just did a lot of reading. So I'm a different higher earning woman, okay? But I could see how they didn't do that because there's like my social background is a little bit different. I came from a rough situation, so I had to learn and adapt and figure out my social setting. But most women who are in that higher earning bracket, they're focused on the bad. They're not focused on what's happening in their community. They're not focused on what's going on with their men. They're focused on what they need to do to climb that ladder to get that check. So a streamline focused on money and being more self-centered, I could see how that could be a problem for women that are high earners. Because even though you are a high earner, being self-centered will keep you away from a good man because he makes $60,000 a year, or he's a disabled veteran and is not working at all. You want to reject him and look for this man that doesn't exist. This 6-figure man is going to cater to all your emotions and all your needs. You're looking for an effeminate male that just is not existent And then when you get him and he cheats on you with JoJo, you want to get mad because you got this effeminate male who was all attentive, but it was all a front to get to your money. So a lot of these women end up going in these cycle of relationships that don't last because they're looking for this fairy tale because their minds have been focused on a false reality. They are a part of that trap that's been set for us through corporate slavery. The first trap is it entraps your mind. So those women are in a mind trap, which is keeping them away from their counterparts. And that is very sad because, during the pandemic, Black women, like financially, we were excelling. We were opening businesses. They were thriving. We were turning record profits. We were climbing that ladder. And also, marriages rose at the same time. We started marrying our counterparts. But then you also started to see more of this rhetoric online of putting us against each other. So Willie Lynch came into the play, and social media was the platform for that to happen. So any progress we could have made wasn't made, and we're just taking steps backwards. That I'm not understanding how people are not able to see that this is on purpose, like the miseducation, the lies that are said about what the men don't do this, women don't do that. It just doesn't make sense to me. So to any high earning Black women out there, I want to encourage you first to just go pick up some books and kind of learn about what's going on. Pick up the new Jim Crow first. Pick up that book. Pick up the new Jim Crow. So that's the easy one to start with, and then build your way up from there. So you can understand how you play a role in that in corporate America, making that money, and with your mind being enslaved by the new master, which is your CEO.
Drop that mic. Drop that mic. Kaboom. Okay. All right. That was very powerful. Well delivered and very bad. I felt all your words. Felt you. Zuri.
Are we just talking about all the points or just one?
Wherever your heart leads you, I just wanted to see how my monologue came across and what resonated, if anything, just to get your initial views.
All of the points that you made, I wasn't able to write all of them down, but all of them resonated with me very strongly because that is something that I see on the daily basis and that I hear from men. And I agree with every point that you made. I feel like it is strongly correct. And if we work and correct those situations, then that we can move forward.
Okay.
I agree with every point that you said.
Okay. All right. So looks like we're getting alignment, at least on the foundational premise, and then we can kind of do that from there. Let's bring in the mind of the Drake.
So I hate to follow the trend, but I'm also going to have to agree with the points that you highlighted, Brother George. All of them, for the most part, were pretty succinct. They were well displayed and put on Front Street. As you said, there's been a lot of issues that have popped up, and the pandemic hasn't really helped too much. But I suspect that's more due to the conditions that people found themselves placed in. And like anything else, when you're already in a comfortable situation, people are caged up. They don't really have much room to kind of expand. Typically, you can see some of the best in humanity when that's the case, but you also tend to see some of the worst side. So, like anything else, unresolved issues that were already present, they're now going to get a little bit of fuel for the fire, so to speak, just because there's not much of an outlet. And so, any unresolved issues, any resentment, or any schism that was already in place is more than likely going to widen a little bit, just given the conditions. But uh, ultimately, it's not the pandemic, it's not quarantine, it's the fact that you have, again, unresolved issues. It's a very real set of circumstances we find ourselves in. They're also unique to us. So it's not necessarily as though we have other counterparts in the world, other people who can identify with the issues that are currently facing us. Uh, this is a uniquely Black issue. Now, there are issues at large in the world. You do have other conflicts, the whole gender war, so to speak. It's not a Black issue. It's really a global issue. You have white people who are dealing with it. You have Asians. You have Hispanic and Latinos. You have Native Americans. Everyone, to the most part, is dealing with the differences that exist between men and women in the geopolitical circumstances we find ourselves in. But given that Black people already have pre-existing issues that predate all this gender warring, again, you go ahead and throw that on the pile, you have a much bigger set of tinder to work with. So you're going to have a much bigger fire. So I forgot who it was who first coined the term, but as usually the case when other people are getting the cold, we're the ones catching pneumonia. And that's how we find out where we are currently.
So I've got this leads me to a question. I'm sitting here typing it out and trying to think of the correct verbiage as you're speaking. And here's it came from Lakita's acknowledgement, and Lakita, I commend you for the position you're taking when you said, hey, I make more money than my husband, and then you gave your assessment, which was very powerful. And again, I'm never on the show for agreement or disagreement, just authentic conversation so we can all challenge each other's thought. But so here's my question that was inspired by Lakita. The man you see today is a product of the mother who raised him yesterday. So in that vein, how can today's African woman be so critical and unconcerned about the man? Does that question make sense?
Yes.
All right. I'd like to hear from one of because both of you are mothers, correct?
Yes.
Do you all have sons?
No.
Yes, we just had a boy.
Oh,
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So how does that question hit you? Because I just find it ironic that like I said, these conversations I've been in since the first episode. It's like, well, wait a minute, a woman raised that man that you're dogging out. You know, that man that you're saying he's just weak or lazy or just don't. You know, he's the product of, statistically, most of us are raised in single parent households, and you know who that means. So help me make it make sense.
A woman was never meant to raise a child alone. And with the abandonment of being left with a child comes, it's a form of mental and sexual abuse to me. Because I carried your child, I gave birth to this child, and now you've left me to take care of the child on my own. And with that comes the mental abuse, because now I'm having to deal with the rejection, the ostracizing in my community, the ostracizing in my church and my family. I'm having to deal with multiple layers of people putting things on me as a person, and also anything that I'm still dealing with you because you're still absent, right? So because of that, I want to say, I'm sorry, my cat is messing with my lamp. Because of that, my husband did come from a single mom, and I once was a single mom, and I had to kind of go through some healing myself when I got with my husband, because I had realized I was living in a state of emergency. Over the past few years, I was separated from my first husband, because I left, but I thought I was good, but until I got confronted with another real relationship, and I realized, oh my God, I am not good. I have the independent woman syndrome, where I don't want your help. I can do it on my own type of mindset. When I need your help, I need you. I love you. So I was kind of fighting myself and fighting the relationship. So I went through a healing process. But my husband's mother, unfortunately, she went through some issues that kind of affected her long term. He ended up having to go live with his dad. He had to leave living with her because of some health issues she was having as a result of being a single mom, mental health issues. It pushed her over the edge So because of that, because of his mama issues, and when we first got together, it came up. And first before we got married, I made him heal that relationship. Because you can't marry me if you don't love your mom. Regardless of what happened, I can't be your wife if you don't love her, because if you don't love her, you're not gonna love me, because that's who made you. Regardless of what happened or how it went, you got to understand the circumstances of what it feels like to be a single mother and be abandoned with a child. And to go to your dad, and your dad raised you up, there was a lot of misogynistic ideas that was taught to him that he had to unlearn as well. So he was willing to do the work. So I'm very lucky that he was willing to allow me space to do the work, and I was willing to allow him space to do the work. And we still working. It ain't over. He's going through Man Heal Thyself right now. He's in this cohort. So he's going through a healing process where he's learning how to eat better. He's unlearning bad eating habits. He's unlearning self-abuse he was doing, things like that came from the broken home that he came from. That made it extremely difficult for him. So for a woman to raise a son efficiently and not raise a broken man because she's a broken woman from being neglected by the father, it's not possible, because we're not designed as humans to do that. We're not designed for that. There's going to be some damage. So I think that men need to give their mothers their humanity and give them space for error, and realize everybody's not going to respond to that type of neglect like nothing happened. And everybody's not going to be able to pull their stuff by their bootstraps and, pull, and do what they need to do. Some people fold under that type of pressure. People say they don't know how I did it, and I don't know how I did it. Shoot, some days I was just running on coffee and adrenaline, but I was getting it, and I was getting the bag. 2 jobs, no child support, just doing what I had to do to not have to have any problems in my life. So I can see how that can be mentally disrupting, because that's not a natural function for a woman. There was no room for my divine feminine to flourish. There was no room for my head to rest mentally. So for women who are raising these broken men, I have a son. It makes me, when I had him, I realized how fragile a man can be, because I held this little bitty man, little baby boy in my hands, and I looked at him and I was like, wow, you guys can be the most small, fragile, gentle little people. Like, oh my goodness. And then I instantly thought about how much the world is going to hate him simply because he's a Black man. They're going to assume he did something wrong. They're not going to look at him as a child. They're going to target him in public. Like, he's going to face all these things simply by walking down the street. And I immediately felt that fear. Not every mama going to feel that. But that's because, again, I educated myself. So Black women, we need to go through a process of, when you get that child and when you're dealing with men out here, like you were saying, most women only deal with the small percentage of men. We need to be more selective. And you need to understand something very, very, very important. If he gets you pregnant, that's not going to make him stay. And if you have that baby, be ready to care for that baby on your own with no malice. Because you made the choice to continue with a baby that you knew the dad didn't want or didn't want to be with you. They wasn't going to make him come back. It doesn't work. This ain't back in the day when the man stayed when you got pregnant. This is a new day. They going to walk and they going to go to somebody else and get them pregnant. Like, that's, like you said, that top percent of men have 5 babies at one time. Yeah, that's the man that you're going to end up with, because you're not really being selective and you're not really taking an opportunity to realize what you need as a woman, as opposed to what you think you want, which is like something that's subconsciously programmed into you, that you want a man that look like this and look like that. And you don't really want that. You were told you want that. You don't even know what you want because you haven't even explored yourself. So I know I'm kind of like going down bunny trail there, but but just by having a son, I'm able to kind of have a new set of eyes and a newfound patience with my husband. Also, I get frustrated, sometimes, I stomp off and ride off and go, and go for a drive, come back. But I realize that we're going through undoing years of chattel slavery. We're undoing years of mental and sexual abuse. We're having to heal all of that. So I have to give him space to show up and be that better him. And I have to give myself space to come out of that hole I dug myself into when I was in the INDEPEN, and that little, and I was in that era, getting the bag, working 2 jobs, nails done, hair done. Hey, I was in that phase, and I didn't have no man. I just had little friends I deal with every now and then. I was abusing myself in that process, and I didn't realize that I was chipping away at myself until I got a real man, and it wasn't nothing really left of me to give him. You know what I'm saying? I had to kind of build it back up and mold it back up and fix all those wounds and be ready to be that wife. So, yeah, that is what I think about women who raise broken Black men. They haven't done the work. When they got the child, they got angry instead of getting in a book and settling your mind down and realizing what you committed to. That was your choice to have that baby. And it's because it was like mama's baby, daddy's baby. You got to stand on that. You got to stand on that. And if he come back, let him come back. But at the same time, don't hold no malice, because that's not, you're going to teach your child the wrong things. So that's all I got to say.
Now, Lakita, where can we catch your show at?
Sorry. I have a show.
Because, girl, you powerful. You powerful.
I do TikTok sometimes.
Okay. Zuri.
There you go.
I agree with some of the points that she said, and excuse me. At the end of the day, women, when we start raising Black men or young boys, that we have to make better decisions on who we sleep with as a whole and who we choose to be with. And a lot of the times, we as women like to have babies at young ages, and 21 is still considered young to me. And we feel like, okay, just because I have feelings for this man, I'm gonna have this baby, and the man doesn't even feel the same way. But we feel like that baby's gonna connect us, and that doesn't connect the man to you just because you have this baby. And then once we have the child, like Laquita said, and if the man leaves, we like to become bitter, take it out on the child, talk bad about the man, emasculate the sons. Emotional instead of being logical. Even though we're more emotional women, we like to be emotional. We don't like to hold men in their lives, and most importantly, accountable for decisions that we decided to make. Like she said, the independent phase that a lot of women go through, or the HOE phase in their 20s, kind of in their 30s as well, or or we like to get
I told George about my whole phase. I went through a whole phase.
You've been delivered.
And then we want to turn around and then say that there's no good men. And like you said, we like to choose only a particular group when there's a whole lot of other men that are willing to do the things that we want, but we just don't do it. And I think a lot of it will stop kind of bridging the gap would be to stop having children out of wedlock, because a lot of us think it's love and it's not lust. One thing that my father taught me when I was young, before I joined the military, scenario that he gave me, he was just like, he told me already, don't become a statistic. And then he was like, let's just say you're going to college and you have your whole life ahead of you, and the man has his whole life ahead of him. He's into sports, he has a career, and you get pregnant. Your life stops, his doesn't. So we as women need to start looking at things of that and being accountable at the end of the day, realizing, hey, I might have to take care of this baby on my own.
All right. Okay. This is a power-packed conversation tonight. I don't know if anybody's getting things out of it. It's hitting me. Bobby.
So both sisters very much on point. There's a level of intentionality that we need to get back to badly. And I think it's safe to say, generally, collectively, definitely going to use the wide brush strokes because it's widespread in various sectors, but it all leads to the same road. We really, as a whole, do not, when it comes to living our lives, we don't begin with the end in mind. There's a lot of the mentality where, I still have time or I can do such and such and I can just make it up on the back end. It's sort of like when you're in school and you have work to be done or you're at home, there's a project that's due and you're like, well, I'll just go and have fun. I'll just go trick it off. I'll just go draw, I'll read something, I'll play a game, I'll talk to my friends. It's no biggie. I'll go ahead and try to get it done. And then the last minute, the 12th hour, 11:59 on the clock, and here you are working like a madman, a madwoman to try and get this assignment knocked out that you had forever and a day to do. And you squandered, you pissed off all the time, you had all the opportunities. And now if you're able to get it completed, even, that's a big if. But if you're somehow able to get the point where you say done, the finished result is so haphazard, so cockeyed, so wonky that in most cases, any halfway decent teacher professor will look at that, look at you in the eye, ball it up, and throw it in the garbage. They won't even bother to waste the ink from their pen to write F on it.
Mm.
And the reality is, if you just simply did what you had to do, if you began with the end in mind, you more or less could have gotten the same enjoyment as everybody else did.
Mm.
It just would have required you to make some sacrifices to put the time invested up front. And then afterwards, you have whatever time left all for yourself to do what you do. In other words, you can win later. So what happens is you have a lot of us, unfortunately, who make the bad decisions. They go get involved with people they know they shouldn't be with. They spend too much time in places they shouldn't be at in the first place.
Right.
They don't take things seriously. They just act as though someone came and gave them a gift card with unlimited time,
Right.
unlimited Chuck E. Cheese tokens, Dave and Buster's tokens, whatever the case may be. You can just go and rack it up, swipe, 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 swipe. This card will not decline on you. And lo and behold, when they say, okay, well, I'm 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Now it's time to get serious. Now it's time to go ahead and live life and settle into the next phase of life. And unfortunately, what they learn in many cases all too late is that while you're alive, yes, you do have time, there's chances, but opportunities are not guaranteed to anybody.
Mm.
Right.
There's no rule, there's no metric, there's no preordained setup or rules where anyone has any select opportunities. George may have been born on this earth with 101 different opportunities to his name over the course of his lifespan. Zuri might have been born with only 3 opportunities to her. Lakita might have been the lucky one, and she just has 1,001. She can literally trick off 999 opportunities that come her way, and if she decides, she pulls it together for the 1,001, she's in there. And none of us can tell
What that is.
where it falls.
Right.
Sometimes we get second chances, but it takes so long for it to come back around that ultimately, when we do get it, really it's just to check off a box. The good that it would have done us when we got it early. Now there's very minimal reward, but we can just say, well, at least I got it this time.
Right.
True.
So, of course, when you're young, you don't understand these concepts. You don't know these things because no one gave you the rule book. The issue is we don't have enough people from the older generations who are being honest with the younger ones and giving this information.
Yeah.
On the other side of the coin, we also don't have enough, I won't say what the number is, but we don't have enough younger people who are open to listening to this. So there is a bit of a disconnect. There's a gap between the people who have the information and aren't sharing it, but you also do have some who don't want the information and reject it. But you do have some on the other side of the spectrums and they're not getting to each other. Ultimately, we need to get to a point where we understand collectively that life isn't promised to us. We need to make the most of each day we have, yes, but we also need to be wise and mindful of how we use the day. So just because no one promised you the next day or the next minute, that's not an excuse to get reckless and just do any stupid old thing and just chalk it up to, well, I don't know what's coming next. Because in the event that you do have a longer lifespan than you anticipated, you've got to live with the rest of the time.
Yes.
So the rest of the time you have on this earth, it can either be a blessing, it can either be a huge benefit to you, or it can be a prison sentence.
Right. Like
Yeah.
life is full of
The
options.
choice is yours, and it belongs to no one else but you. Sister Zuri, go ahead. I see something. I see something baking up there. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna wait till you're finished because there was something else that I had wanted to add on, but I had forgot to say that. So you, you
Yeah,
done?
go right ahead, Zero. He's
Yeah,
giving it to you.
because Laquita had mentioned something about men that if they don't love their mom, they don't love their women. I mean, they don't love women to something, or you can't be loved if a man doesn't love his mom.
Hmm.
I was going to say that I believe that to be untrue because sometimes forgiveness, of course, so the heart can be light, but love, if it is, it's from a far distance because I've seen too many times and heard too many stories where women have treated their sons bad, put them out on the streets, and it wasn't just off emotion, it was pattern, it was off anger, and they still even do it now to this day. So I feel like when I hear women say that a man can't love women because they don't love their mom, it's untrue because I know plenty of men that have issues with their mom and only they deal with her, but they know how to treat women. I feel like sometimes we give that mom a title to have an excuse to get away with doing the things that were done when they need to be held accountable for the actions and things that they did to their sons.
I wanna say something to that. When I say that a man, if he doesn't love his mother, he can't love me. The love does not forgive the action.
Mhm.
The love does not negate the abuse or the neglect that happened. But love in itself is unconditional. Love is able to look at you and say, you are not your behavior.
Hmm.
You treated me bad because your mind was sick.
Hmm.
Point blank, period. And that's the situation with my husband's mom. Her mind was sick. She wasn't born like that. When she was a little girl, she wasn't acting like that. It was the conditioning that happened that got her to that point to where she was that type of woman to be that way toward a child. When you're able to see that um, behavior from a different angle and really embrace what forgiveness and love is, you're able to say, I love you and I forgive you. And please forgive me for holding a grudge against you and not and hating you and having malice toward you. Releasing that malice, releasing that hate, forgiving the action doesn't mean you're inviting that person back in your life. It doesn't
Exactly.
mean you're saying, let's come over and have dinner. We cool. Let's bang bang. Like let's go, mom. Let's go on a trip. Let's no, I'm not saying that, but I am saying that that forgiveness and that love is going to bring a healing to that man's heart to where when he's with his wife and things aren't going 100%, he's not going to step out and give up. He's not going to look at me and say, oh, well, you did this, I'm going to leave. He's going to say, I love you. Whatever you're going through, let's work this out because you're my wife. It's a different type of respect and a different type of understanding that comes with being able to forgive and love your mother. And I come from a pretty horrible mom myself. I got a convict mama, okay? So she's crazy. I'm able to relate with, you got to forgive your mother, to my husband very much. So because that was a part of my healing journey, was having to forgive her first. Not my dad. My dad's cool, but my mom was the issue. The same with him. So I understand there was a conditioning that happened that got her there. And once I understood the humanity, I gave her humanity back, and I allowed room for error. I was able to love my mama. She crazy. I ain't finna be over there chilling with her because she's an addict. I ain't finna be over there, but hey mom, love you. Call her on Mother's Day, call her on birthday,
From a distance.
basic, yeah, from a distance, from a distance. Say away.
If I can just toss a coin in that little well you're building up there, I believe, especially for men, but also definitely for women as well too. I believe that the truth is in the middle of both of what you all are saying, and I think the solution to that, and I think George, I know the way his mind works is probably TikTok in the back there somewhere. I believe the key element involved in that is a level of emotional intelligence that's lacking or isn't developed. And it is something that can be developed. It's not something that you're just born with, like a regular amount of intelligence, and then it's just you either have it or you don't. But when you don't have the tools, and this is what I think what most people do, when you don't have the tools for something, most people tend to take one of two pathways. You either go ahead and seek the tools or try to find ways to deal with it, or you'll just leave it alone altogether. So that's universal. If you have a complicated math problem in front of you, you're going to do one or two things with it. You're either going to go ahead and say, okay, well, how do I figure this out? Let me go do some research, see if I can figure it out. Or you're just going to up and say, you know what? Not today, Satan. And you're going to just go do something else, anything else but this. In the realm of emotions, because even though we don't necessarily understand them in depth, we all have them, we all deal with them, they all affect us, they all have significant impact on how we move and how we do what we do. That can be very sensitive, especially when it's something that's deeply rooted as the relationship between a child and their parents. Because that's a very complex mechanism going on, even when things are running perfectly fine, because this is not only your source, this is your root, this is your parents are your genesis, but they're also your first teachers. They're your first examples of manhood, your first examples of womanhood, your first example of men or women, how you relate to them, and how you fit in the context. So it's a very challenging thing, especially when they're less than ideal. So because you, Lakita, and your husband were willing to go ahead and do the work, you're willing to go and get therapy and get tools to try and process and handle and deal with this, you were able to get the points where you were able to progress beyond that. But for the person that doesn't have those tools, who has not developed their emotional intelligence, in most cases, in fact, I probably say the majority of cases, the easier response, because you start to live life to some extent, you start to deal with this person. I think the easier choice is for them to just shut down. So I don't love this person. I hate this person, to cut off. This isn't worth getting into, because they don't have the answers.
Mm.
So I think that's where that comes from. So that's why I do believe Zuri is also correct when she says just because someone's relationship isn't intact with their mother or their father on the flip side, doesn't mean that they still can't properly love you. However, it is worth noting that I do believe that if you do have some issues in that relationship with your parents, specifically with the opposite sex, I do believe that there will be a ceiling that's placed on your ability to properly, fully embrace the relationship you have with the opposite sex. So I do believe if you don't have a good relationship with your mother as a man, you may still be able to get on well with your girlfriend, your wife, your significant other, but there will be a ceiling on just how high that relationship can go, and vice versa for a woman with her father and her boyfriend or husband.
Okay, so let's just summarize some of those points that everybody gave regarding my assertion that today's man is a product of yesterday's mothering. All of you made some very significant points that I think deserve their own just discussion. But we won't be able to critique these tonight, but I want to at least raise them and plant the seeds of these discussions. Lakita said something very powerful that I really want to explore. She made a statement that men need to give their mothers humanity. That was really, really, that was deep. So I mean, there's some direction here. We gotta drill down on that. It's probably going to be in part 3. That was a deep one. And then also, Lakita made this comment about women raising broken men, which caused me to ask the question. We don't have to answer it right now, but are we raising broken men, or are we breaking them through the raising? Something to think about.
I think breaking them.
Then Zuri made a very strong assignment, really. Make better choices of who we sleep with. And that inspired another question, which is, why do they make these choices in the first place? So I think that really calls for some further discussion. And then I love Drake's philosophical platform. Begin with the end in mind.
I agree. A lot of us don't look at the big picture of everything. We just look at the now and what's in front of us in the moment instead of
Yeah.
looking at the end game or the foundation. Or like I say, the big picture of everything. That's how it's going to affect everyone,
Yes.
not only ourselves.
And in order to really do that effectively, it's going to require what Bobby also brought to our attention. It's going to require the ability of emotional intelligence.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
And
I
so,
agree.
yeah.
'Cause-
So these things are going to need to be drilled down. What were we going to say, Zuri?
yeah, I was going to say, like what Bobby said, the emotional intelligence, majority of us, I would say maybe 80%, don't even, or even like what Laquita said, we don't explore ourselves. We don't get to know ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of us don't even know what unconditional love is because we've only been loved conditionally under certain circumstances. And a lot of us don't even love ourselves. When you love yourself, you allow someone else to love you because you already know what it means to be loved and how to treat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're happy within, we all know that happiness comes from within. You're not looking for another being to bring happiness into your life. Yes, they can, but that doesn't make or break you because you're already happy as a person. They're just adding to your happiness.
Yes. So we only have a little bit of time left to go, but I wanted to get in one more section before we take off, and that's the economic aspect to what I think is contributing to this huge gap between the male and female in our community. A couple of questions, maybe three, and you guys can choose anyone you want to pick. Why aren't women in our community more inclined to be fixers and closers of this gap once they attain this position of success? Why isn't that in the back of the mind when I get to a certain point in my life and I make this money, I'm going to do my part to correct this situation, especially for if I have a son for my son. And next to that is, does money make the man, or does the man? And then my last question on that is, does money determine who is in charge? Let's start with Zuri. Zuri, what's your thoughts on any of those questions? Which one do you want to address?
We can address all three if we have time, but
Okay, go right ahead.
repeat the first question again, so then we go over because I have an answer for all.
Why aren't the six-figure African females in our community more inclined to be fixers and solvers of our situation rather than either dismissive or ignorant to the problem?
One thing
Is it something about the money? What is it that's going on?
I think one thing, just because a woman gets the bag doesn't mean that she's still emotionally and intelligently there. And there's a difference when women go get the bag and when men do. When women go get the bag, they like to divorce their husbands, boyfriends, and feel like they're on a different level. When men go get the bag and they're married, majority of the time they figure out, how can I make my family better? But women don't do those kinds of things when they get the money.
George,
Lakeita.
I would tell you about something.
Okay.
I had one of my I think it was my housing dean at Dillard University. And I had gotten into a debate with her. I was a freshman. This debate got me put out of college. I had a debate with her in the cafeteria about why were there so many illiterate people in New Orleans when there were so many prestigious Black colleges in New Orleans? Why? Dillard University sat in the 8th ward, and we had some of the worst literacy rates in the country for adults, right? This lady told me, I came from the projects, I got my PhD. If there's no excuse. So basically, she was blaming the people who were around her for not knowing how to read, for not being educated, she put the blame on them. She had no responsibility to reach back and help them because no one reached back and helped her. You know, she did it all on her own, and they need to do the pull the bootstraps mentality. So a lot of that right there, and I got into a deep argument with her about how she was basically a supporter of white supremacy by thinking like that. And then the whole cafeteria stopped eating and just ran over, and it became a situation where I'm debating her and like 5 other seniors, and we're going back and forth. And I mean, it wasn't a shouting match. It was a civil debate.
Did anybody video this?
No, because this was back in like 2004. This was
that's a TikTok moment.
We had phones, and basically I ruffled her feathers because by the end of the debate, everyone was quiet, and I pretty much at one debate we shook it off, and I walked off, and I ended up getting in trouble for trying to contact Assata Shakur in Cuba, and I got in a ton of trouble for that. And she used that as a reason.
You did what?
I wanted to contact Assata Shakur because of her stance on homosexuality in the Black community. She wrote a piece on the Talking Drum, which was where at the time it was a publication where she communicated to America. Okay, and she wrote something about it, and I had questions about why she felt a certain way about it. Some of the stuff she said, I needed to speak with her directly about it, and I felt like I could communicate with her. So I was communicating with people, and I got an email, and I got an email, and I got an email, and I got a knock on the door, and I got into trouble. And the housing dean said I was a troublemaker. I was a troublemaker, and that I was a big mouth, and that I would basically convert the whole Dillard University to not be Christian anymore, because I was telling her she's a Christian, she's Black, she's not helping her people, and that's the same profile as a white supremacist. I mean, the only thing that's not the same is that she has Black skin.
Right.
And so because of that, and I told them I wasn't supposed to go to chapel. They put it on my schedule and all of that to kind of ruffle my feathers. And when I fought my schedule, they used that as the opportunity to put me out because it was a private college. So they could choose who can attend their college or not. So I registered for UNO. I packed my stuff and went back home, and Hurricane Katrina put them under 14 feet of water.
What?
Yep. And then
Look at God. What were you doing?
I came home and cried like a baby. It's like it was worse than getting kicked out of the club with your best outfit on. You know how defeated I felt? But then when I saw Dillard University and all I could see was the roof of the college and water, that whole area.
Girl, no.
Like X's on the houses in that area. A lot of people died in the 8th ward. Okay. And I got sent home from that. I had no family there when I was in college.
For being you. For being your
just
authentic
being
self.
me. Might have been a blessing in disguise. For
not buck dancing and going along to get along.
Right. So many lessons in that story. We had to come back and mind that's a powerful story. Man, there's so many lessons in that. Jesus. Bobby, I know you're not a woman, but this question, why do, in your opinion, from a male perspective, do the more successful women, why aren't they more inclined to be solvers and fixers of the gap than continual perpetuators?
George, ain't I a woman? I'm just I kid, I joke. This is 2023. You can't play like that anymore.
No. I mean, the question was very relevant, brother.
Next thing you know, that's going to be the headline. And anyways, why aren't they more inclined to look backwards and to pay it forward? The question is because that's actually a very poignant observation. As long as these debates and stuff have been flying around and the conversation has been going around, um, I'd be lying if I said I haven't heard anyone make that point. Definitely haven't heard it phrased in that manner. But it's actually interesting how I don't hear that more often. And I think it's an insight into the differences between men and women.
Mhm.
As it stands, we're currently in a very interesting age now, where due to opportunities and policies that have come into place since civil rights act was passed and women's rights has been passed and grown. We're in an interesting state right now where we have, and this isn't even just pertaining to the black folk. This is across the board,
Mhm.
where we have men and women who are stuck in a difference of dichotomies.
Mhm.
For the longest time, of course, because women did not have rights independent of men, our roles in society were fixed. You had men that were set with certain roles, certain expectations, certain obligations. Women had their set. And largely, they were really forced into being that way simply because if you didn't basically adapt to these principles, you weren't going to have much success. If a man wasn't essentially being a man, not only would he not receive the respect of his peers, but he also would be less attracted to women. If a woman didn't stick to those that were assigned to her, she'd be looked down upon. That would also hinder her opportunities for having that male presence in the household and, as such, having that protection and provision. But since we've reached a point where we now have equality, not necessarily equity, but equality in terms of women's access to be able to provide and protect themselves, to be able to make a living, to earn and such, and so on and so forth. Women have evolved in the sense where now they are no longer traditional; they are more modern.
That's what I was going to
Some by choice, some by force. However, women are still women. What I mean by that is some of these things, and many of these things actually are also ingrained in us. I believe, just from a biological perspective, that of course, when we talk about evolution, we understand how that works. You know, parents have brown eyes, you can have brown eyes, hair traits, skin characteristics, features, and all that other stuff, talents, abilities, height, size, all that stuff that's in the DNA. I also believe, and I've also seen some studies as well that indicate the same, that repeated behaviors or actions can also be inherited as well. So as you do something, you do a thing, you do it repeatedly, this becomes your habit, this becomes your practice, this becomes your norm. You do this day in, day out over the weeks, months, years, decades, and so on and so forth. That becomes part of your DNA, that becomes part of your code. And we do understand that habits are built by repeating the same thing over and over, and neural pathways are created. So certain things you do and you don't even think about anymore, it's just natural for you. I believe those things can be passed down over time. So when you have certain roles that are repeated over and over and over again, historically down the line, generations and generations, even if you want to say that you don't think our gender roles are biological, I believe that just due to repetition over a significant amount of time, that these gender roles have become part of who we are. They are biological to us. There are certain roles that women naturally fit. There are certain roles that men naturally fit.
That's what I was going to say.
So even when women becoming more modernized, they can fend for themselves like men. They can join the military. They can fight. They can own firearms. They can work jobs, be CEOs, owners, and everything. Women still want to feel like women with men. And so one of the issues that I've heard and seen many times in relationships are you have women who are in the modern mindset who want to behave in a modern fashion. They don't want to be held to traditional obligations that the women of yesteryear were, but they still want to hold men to their traditional roles because, it doesn't feel right. No
Mhm.
matter how much a woman earns, she might be a six-figure earner. She can go ahead and buy her own cars, buy her own this, her own house, but it still isn't going to necessarily make her feel in an internal way the way it does if a man does it. Because to have a man go ahead and do this, to use his money, to use his resources, to say, girl, my man got this for me, it does something different emotionally. internally than saying, I went and got this myself. Men, on the other hand, our roles haven't changed. There's been no revolution in that sense. So men, by and large, have not changed. You do have some modernized men now, but really their change hasn't been due to new laws passed, new freedoms. It's really changed in response to the women's change.
Yeah, I agree.
So, because of that, now, since that's not necessarily something that we would like to do, that these changes haven't necessarily been beneficial to us.
Right.
The women's change has been more positive and optimistic, but the men's change has been a bit more reluctant, a bit more resistant, a bit more bitter, less open, and there's a bit of resentment that comes with that as well in some cases. So when you have these conflicts, women are not necessarily looking back to pay it forward because in what is the norm for us based off of practice, men are the fixers, men are the doers. If there's a frog at the door, there's a snake by the driveway, you go get your husband, you go get your son, you go get your next door neighbor to come and get it. There's a rat in the house, go get the mouse, eat, jump on the table, lift your skirt up, scream and holler. You're the man, go do this. There's a bump in the night. Honey, wake up. I think someone's in the house, go check it out.
See,
The woman ain't getting the shotgun, racking that thing and going down. I'm gonna count to 5, and by the time I do, you better be getting. That's not happening.
yeah.
So women are, and I don't necessarily mean this in a negative fashion, but women adhere to those modern ideals when it's convenient for them. But when it comes time for when it's inconvenient, they turn the traditionalism back to the men. Many men are having issues with that, and there's some kickback to that. But largely, it's not turning backwards because women do not see that as their responsibility. They see it as men's responsibility to fix the community, fix what's
Right.
broken, what's broken. But if the men aren't in the position to do that for one reason or another, how can it get done? You have a disconnect between those whose obligation, whose job it is to do it, and those who have the means and don't want to do it because it's their job.
I agree. I agree with that, and I agree with what you said. Because I feel like women have lost touch with their roles and being nurturers, creating families. They don't want that. Most modern women don't want that anymore, but they want the protection. And in all honesty, yeah, we can protect ourselves, but only to a certain extent. We can't I don't care if you own a gun or do all that. A woman cannot protect herself how a man can protect himself and how a man can protect a woman.
Okay, boy, this is really this is powerful. If you notice on the screen here, we have somebody in the comment section by the name of AD, and AD says it's actually jarring that no one is here. But if you were shitting on Black women, this chat would be full.
Well,
That's pretty powerful because
They love to put us against each other.
whoever's listening, I'm so glad we have this series. I would say all of our series are a series that our followers and watchers should keep in their library and go back and listen over and over and over, because you're going to hear so much rich depth of content that you can't internalize it all at one time. You're going to have to take this in pieces, and there's a lot going on here. Even when I go back, I'm going to hear some things that I didn't hear at first. That's how deep this is. But you know what's unfortunate, to speak to AD, is that quality of content is not the key to success, so to speak. The higher the quality, the lesser the clicks. The lower the quality, the more base you appeal. That's that lack of emotional intelligence, so to speak. You appeal to the base emotion, and that just inflames people to stick and stare. And these are really serious problems, and I know that the success of this show depends on people liking and clicking. So we're always kind of looking how to find that balance to hit this in a serious manner, but also make it engaging enough for people to have a full chat room. This country has been operating on a provide content to the level of a fifth grader philosophy. And I'm challenging people to say, you know what? I think we're smarter than fifth graders. It's time for us to level up.
That's on purpose.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, it's time to close it out, but I want to thank you, AD, for that comment. Let's see. AD also said that Zuri on that red pill Kool-Aid. All right. AD, we appreciate your input and the next time we have this show, because we're going to be doing a part 3, 4 on this series. Grab some people, man, and or I'm not sure which gender you are, but grab some people and make them watch, because this is good stuff we're doing here. But what I want to do here to close out is give the panelists, you have been great. You guys never fail to satisfy. Just an amazing group. Really enjoyed this conversation. This was a very fast hour. But what I want to do is give you this parting. Take 30 seconds. We're going to start with the Drake, and we're going to end with Lakita. Take about 30 seconds and give one strategy to the African female on how to be a component of solution to bridging the gap. From your perspective, go, Bobby.
So my solution, my one take is understanding. The reality is due to a number of different circumstances, some intentional, some unintentional and inconsequential. We have a case where even though as Black people, there is the collective experience that we share in this country, there's also a different lived reality that Black men and Black women have. If Black women are looking at Black men and looking at it through the same lens that they view their own lives through, they're going to miss a lot. There's going to be a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of conflict. Genuinely seek the input of men, and don't just go to any old men, but go to a number of men that you respect and trust. Ask for their honest input and feedback, and listen. You may hear some things you don't necessarily like, but try to listen without your emotional ears and listen to what's being said. Try to process it and see if you can find a commonality. Once you do that, see if you can work there and become a partner with men. We need to be working together, not apart. The work is together because we are a whole people. If we can get to be whole in practical action, we'll begin to see a change and a difference reflected.
Boom. Zuri.
I think we need to quit trying to change other people. We as women trying to change men. If you have to so-called train or change someone, you don't need them in your life. And we have to start taking accountability and also realize everyone that we choose as a mate is a reflection of ourselves, subconsciously or consciously, that we may not want to see, but that other person is showing us. And like Bobby said, take the time to listen to what Black men have to say. If we want to let them lead, we let them lead. We don't have to be right all the time.
That's another point for discussion. We're going to bring that back up. Lakita.
Hey, I want to say Black women need to do two things. And the first thing is going to be they need to shut up and quit talking so much. Right. Just shut up. If you're single, it's you.
Stay out of that one.
Quit being so argumentative. Being argumentative is not feminine.
At all.
Being quiet and listening and then going into reflection and then coming back and being like, hey, I thought about it. And I don't agree because of this, that, and the other. That is being feminine. You don't learn these things because they was taught to us because we grew up in a toxic environment. You learn these things by picking up a book. I learned it from Queen Afua, from being a sacred and going through Sacred Woman. I learned to shut up. I had to go and talk fast for 7 days. And it was the beginning of many talk fasts because I had toxic speech. And it was a big part of my yang or masculine imbalance that I carried from my trauma. So if you single and you find yourself constantly in arguments on Facebook, arguing with somebody else, or constantly arguing with a man that you're with, even always yelling at your children, shut up. Go into quiet. Pick up a book, maybe Queen Afua's book, maybe the new Jim Crow. Pick up a book and learn, rest, and then go back out. Just work on you. It's you, sis. It's you. So that's my advice. It's you. It's not the men. It's you. Once you fix that, then that other percent of men that you haven't been looking at, they're going to start popping up out the woodwork. So you're going to be like, I would never talk to nobody like that. But you know what? I think I'm rocking with him because your emotional intelligence is elevated. You're elevated as a woman. You're able to see what you need to see now. You're not a little girl anymore. You're mature. You're emotionally mature. Right. So that's my advice. My advice is to shut up and learn and try again.
And to add on to that, we as Black women definitely have to stop moving off emotions. Make bad decisions off emotion. So I just wanted to add that to what she's saying.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
Okay. So Lakita said pick up a book. So the next book that I recommend that you all go out and get is the latest hot bestseller, Shut Up. Written by Lakita Beale.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
You
idea.
better write that. You better.
I cut you a check.
You better write that because that's gonna hit. That's bestseller right there.
Yes,
George,
yes. I'll credit you for the title.
Spirit,
you feel that, don't you? Yes. Yes.
I feel the spirit.
That was powerful. So I've got something to offer, but it's going to pale in comparison after that. I mean, damn. So here's my little bitty 50 cents. Jesus, Lakita. By the way, we do have an on-staff statistician, and I meant to get this in earlier. So I want to. It was off of something that Lakita had mentioned earlier. Our statistician informs us that the allegation that the man is the one who left the woman to raise the child by herself is not as accurate as we might think. He says, statistically speaking, most Black women leave the relationships 8 out of 10 marriages, 10 times in marriages and committed relationships.
Very true.
So that might be something we need to forward over into part 3 and pick that back up. So thanks to our statistician who's always working hard for the benefit of good quality content in the Black space. My little 30-second advice would be this to the woman. This can apply in general, but this is to the woman. Learn to separate blame from responsibility. They are not the same. One is of no earthly good. The other one is totally forward moving and solution building.
That accountability.
It's another effort.
Separate blame from responsibility. So, hey, this has been great. You guys got to do this again. To do this again. So when part 3 comes back up, when our producer asks for you to be in part 3, please come back. We need this continuity of intellect.
Most definitely.
And I would like to add, there's a couple of people here that I really would like to have. I'd like to have Doc Locks on here. I'd like to get Risa back on here. China. I mean, we need the power, and this is so hugely important. This is our wealth. the male-female union is the foundation of our true wealth.
Yes.
And we're finding every reason to live in poverty.
If you don't bridge the gap, we'll never move forward.
That's right.
So this is important. It's really important. So I love you guys. It's just been great.
Love you too. It's been great.
And thank you, AD. So to you watchers, viewers, and listeners, have a great week. And until the next time we meet, we'll see you in the Black Space.